welcome to Thinking Green. Here with me tonight is Roberta Paro, and she's the chair of the Connecticut chapter of the Sierra Club. She's been on before, but welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Ronna.
And the reason I reached out to Roberta at this time was there have been quite a lot of activities around climate change over the last year. Last September, there was a big march in New York City and events worldwide to bring attention to climate change. And there is a Connecticut event happening this weekend as well. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, so why is such a big deal being made of climate right now?
Well, because we have probably a pretty narrow window to get our greenhouse gas emissions as well as methane emissions down. And so we're trying to organize people, and I want to make sure I'm giving credit to what I think are the two main organizing bodies for this upcoming weekend's march, and that is 350.org is the primary organizing body for the march. Now, does it say 350 CT on that?
Yes.
Okay.
It does.
So I think that would get you. I think that would get you to that. And this starts at noontime. I believe we're starting at the State House, and we are at the end of the march. There's going to be Hartford Earth Day rally, which is or Hartford Earth Day event. And that's being put together by the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network. So I wanted to give credit to those. And back to the question, why is it so important? Well, some of it, there's a bit of urgency about like getting this work done. I think, so making people aware, getting people a chance to come out to a public space where they might make contact with other organizations, with other like-minded people. They can get information and figure out maybe a beginning of somebody they like. Maybe I'll plug in with that group, maybe I'll plug in with that group, but a way to plug in. And I think that's important. Last summer with another organization that I'm involved with, we did some listening project up at Willimantic's Third Thursday Street Festivals. And it was specifically on the environment and probably even more specifically on climate. And it became pretty clear most people are aware but don't really know where to go or who to turn to do something, how to engage and get involved. So here's an opportunity on Sunday afternoon either to participate in the march or either show up afterwards. Now I'm going to say, where is it afterwards? Are we going to Bush? See, I'm going to go to the march. I think
wait, I actually have something. Connecticut, Hartford Earth Festival. Yes. Mortenson Riverfront Plaza and the Connecticut Science Center.
Very good. So that's where we will end up. So, and you know, I mean, obviously people can make their way to websites and so forth, but it's wonderful if you get a chance to engage with some of the folks that, you know, are already involved and you get a chance to talk to people.
So I think this is a minority view, but we're still hearing in the press sometimes that this isn't real. This isn't real. Is this debate still going on?
Apparently, there are still some groups trying to say that it's not going on. I mean, I think I just read a couple of weeks ago. So Pope Francis has really taken this on, and he stands on the shoulders of his predecessors, really. But he, well, I guess because of how he presents himself, he's got quite the stage, the world stage right now. So he has taken this on, and I believe people from the Heartland Institute were over in Rome a couple of weeks ago hoping to get some time with him to convince him that he was being misled by the 97% of scientists who say it is, I forget the word they use, but I'll call it human-made.
Right.
You know, fossil fuel, mostly other things, but it's greenhouse gas emissions that we are causing by burning fossil fuels primarily. So, yes, so apparently there are still some groups. I think it's pretty harder and harder to, after you have these storms and after you have more severe weather, to not at least in your mind question, like, is this, you know, what's going on? And I think For me, the thing I keep in mind also is that what we're feeling now is the result of what we did in 1975. There is a long lag time between the emissions and the effects on the biosphere. So that may not be hopeful, but you again go back to the urgency of why we're feeling this already and why we want to come together. And I'll say one other thing. At the end of this year, I think at the end of November it starts, is again the UN is going to have another attempt to get agreement by countries around the world, and it's going to happen in Paris this time. And so there's something about getting people galvanized and saying, you know what, we have to have justice here too, because we're talking about engaging with countries who had very little to do with creating this climate crisis, and yet they may be more impacted. Some of the island nations may see their country disappear at some point, you know, with sea level rise. So I want to make sure people understand that's one of the effects of warming. When the glaciers melt, and they are melting at a rapid rate, that there would be sea level rise. I mean, what I've seen by the year 2100, and I think most of us don't expect to be around then, but nevertheless, no more downtown Mystic, no more Misquamicut. You know, you think of places that you like to go. Where I work in Westbrook, wow, I don't know if the place where I work would be there. It's near Route 1, and yeah, it's just interesting, you know, and something that I think is worth taking action on. I want to give you a chance to talk. I want to say one other thing. There are solutions. It looks like, at least with electricity generation, it is not about the technology any longer. There is a man named Professor Mark, I think it's Z, Jacobson, from Stanford University, who is somebody who has like 2 PhDs and, you know, quite qualified, has done some studies and found that really we could, if we so could change our political, cultural, and social climate, start generating all of our electricity from clean, renewable generation, solar, wind, geothermal, probably some tidal, by 2030. So that's very quick. That's in 15 years, which tells me it's not the technology. It's trying to figure out how do we, again, create a movement and gather enough force to make the change that needs to happen.
Because an investment does have to be made.
An investment does have to be made, and there's already been and there continues to be a lot of investment in fossil fuels. And I want to acknowledge that fossil fuels changed our lives. I mean, the amount of energy that's in whatever measurement of oil you want to take is just huge. I mean, to get that kind of energy with solar, it is going to take some space, lots of rooftops, lots of parking lots. It is doable, though. I just want to make sure we understand that. But we cannot continue to burn fossil fuels. The benefits that we received from them, and when I say we received, there have always been communities that I think Naomi Klein calls them sacrifice zones, which I thought was a good way of saying it, who their health has been impacted because when you burn fossil fuels, you're really creating toxic emissions. These are not benign substances. So we want to get off of fossil fuels as quick as we can. And there's no reason technologically not to do it. We're still, I think, trying to figure out what to do with transportation, and that is significant, but as far as electricity generation, it can be done.
And even transportation, I think, well, the kinds of places we live are going to change. You know, if you look at maps 100 years ago, people were more concentrated in cities where they could walk to most of their daily activities, and the population was quite sparse surrounding the cities where the farms were, and those people didn't go into the city very often.
Right. I think the Sierra Club has 2 broad goals related to this. One is the 100% clean renewable energy in the electricity sector for generation, and that we decrease our emissions by 50% in transportation. And that is thinking about how do you have a smart, more livable community. I went to Stonington Borough a couple weeks ago just because it's a reminder of a built environment, and not, you know, obviously these people had some wealth at one time and maybe still do, but it's a built environment that was built to scale, that makes me, at least when I'm walking around it, feel like this is built for people, not for cars. And it's pleasant and it's enjoyable, and I think that it is possible to figure those things out. People continue to make inroads on that. We maybe need some models to inspire us, but it's absolutely possible.
And actually, if you look at New London, the parts of New London that were not impacted by urban renewal and by having the highway go through it, you can kind of get a glimmer of how that downtown worked.
Right, and absolutely, New London is, I think, a community that is walkable and could be made more so with some support, some thought, some planning. And again, that is our values as a society and where we're going to decide we're going to put our money.
Well, you know, last week, for the first time ever, the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council met in New London.
Okay.
And so I think people on this end of the state are starting to think about transit in a little bit different way. You know, it's less fun all the time to get on I-95 to go anywhere.
Agreed, agreed. Unless you're leaving at 11 p.m. or something, right? And you're going to drive through the night.
And actually, 395 isn't so good anymore. I remember pre-casinos when it was just like a fast country road.
Right, right.
Now, so you've talked about fossil fuels, but I also wanted to note that the nuclear industry, there has been a lot of trouble, environmental and health problems surrounding uranium mines in indigenous lands, a lot of them in the Midwest. So it seems as though sacrifice zones go with all of these methods of getting energy.
That, so far, that seems to have been true, right? And I think one of the hopeful and inspiring things is the Idle No More movement and indigenous people really rising up and saying, you know what, we're going to band together. And it looks like, at least through the Americas, they seem to be somewhat connected around, you know, trying to support one another. And I think that that's something that organizations like the Sierra Club want to get behind and say, you know, this is, you're the leader, we can follow you, this is, we agree, you know, we want to figure out how to provide best resource and, support those efforts to really protect those lands. And I mean, I kind of jump up to the Arctic, and it's not, you know, it's just, that was probably one of the more discouraging announcements, to say that Shell could drill in the Arctic, because scientists have now figured out where we can and cannot drill going forward for fossil fuels. And I have to say, I haven't read that report, so there's certain reasons why, but one of them is they're like, do not go into the Arctic at this point. It's very dangerous, and people, the peoples who live there still rely on, what would you call it, their cultural way of obtaining food. I mean, and they're out there. I mean, this is not like you go to the grocery store, drive over to Stop and Shop, or what, you know, Fiddleheads, or wherever you shop around here. There's many choices, so it's a...
Oh, wow.
It's a, yeah.
Now, gas has been being promoted as being a bridge energy, you know, a way to get us, and there's been a lot of promoting of gas over the last 4 or 5 years. The prices have been very low in general, and it's seen as a way to get us from here and without changing our lifestyle much until all the renewable things are in place. So what's the word on gas?
So what's the word on gas? I mean, I should say the Sierra Club, even when I was first getting involved, it seemed like it was around 2006, 2007, though I cannot be sure, was also saying that. And I think there are, if you look at just natural gas by itself, natural gas, it could be seen as having half the emissions of coal. However, the problem is how we get natural gas now is not the same as it was pre-2004. So it's done a lot by fracking now. And this apparently, this drilling, horizontal drilling that happens into shale rock, there's a lot of leakage of something called methane. That's what gas is. The methane is 86 times approximately more potent than carbon dioxide.
In terms of
greenhouse gas emissions. Now, it does not stay in the atmosphere as long as carbon dioxide. It's in the atmosphere for about 20 years, but it could be part of what is causing our emissions to rise rather rapidly over the past couple of years. And
a lot can happen in 20 years while we wait for it to dissipate.
Correct. I mean, we know the glaciers are melting at a faster rate than the climate scientists have predicted. I mean, we don't want to invest in something. I think that at this point, renewable energy has also gained, I mean, and continues to make gains as far as how efficient it is, as far as how I saw something about windmills that don't even have blades on them anymore. So there's a variety of things. The cost of solar has decreased an awful lot. I wish I could remember the exact percentage, and that's even in the past 5 years. So what might have been an argument, I can understand, maybe 10 years ago this was considered a bridge fuel. It's not looking like it's such a good idea. And we are continuing to, when I say we as a society are continuing to make those investments there. That's money that's being spent there rather than investing on the renewable energy. So, for instance, in Connecticut and in the Northeast, there are, in Connecticut, 5 proposed interstate pipelines to bring fracked gas from West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, which is apparently just really has had a lot of fracking taking place, out through Connecticut. Now, there are some intrastate pipelines that are being built also to provide gas, but most of it is for export. And there are proposed liquefied natural gas terminals up in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, somewhere in Maine. But the idea is to get the gas out for export. So you can see it is simply about making profit for the businesses who are already invested in this technology.
And it probably was about 2007 that we were fighting Broadwater, having a liquefied natural gas terminal in the Sound.
Right. So that was great. People came together, and between Connecticut and New York, no Broadwater. And I think that what the Sierra Club has been doing, and also in partnership, I should say, very strongly with Food and Water Watch, they've done a lot of good work around making people aware about frack gas and trying to stand up to that, and that's in other states. We're not, it doesn't look to my knowledge that we are in danger of fracking happening in Connecticut, but we have these pipelines that are proposed to come through. This goes across, and the proposal to go across and through underneath the Connecticut River, through wetlands, I mean, they are not small impacts.
And potentially very sensitive areas.
Pipelines leak. The question of how much, and would something happen that would cause pollution to our water, it's a possibility. And, so we are trying to make people aware of this. Most of the lobbying efforts are going towards the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, who is the one that gives the permission for the pipelines. So that sounds very much like most people probably, unless they're following something like this, haven't even heard of something called FERC.
Right. And they're not terribly responsive. If I remember the Broadwater experience, they're not that responsive to local concerns.
They may not be,
shown to be.
So we right now, I think if you went to the Connecticut Sierra Club website, you would find a way to submit comments. Those of us who are on a list, an email list, just received notification, I think it was last weekend or just a little before the weekend, about some talking points and what we could do. We've been hosting forums, and sometimes people from 350 have been with us just to educate people on what could be happening in your community and you probably don't know about, and how you can take action. We don't want to just have people feel like, oh, for heaven's sakes, here's one more thing that I feel like I have no control over. So I want to challenge people on that feeling of feeling powerless. I understand why, both from growing up and being children and being powerless, and then I understand why, because we are in a situation where things seem to be more, how do you say it? I don't have a word for it. Let's say it seems to be going towards corporations, towards the larger entities, rather than on local communities being able to say, you know what, this is not good for our economy, this is not good for our health, and we don't want it, you know. So I understand that, and the best thing I can say is get together with other people.
And there is a forum. Pomfret isn't really quite in our backyard, but it isn't that far away.
Right.
And there is an educational forum on June 11th at 6:30 at the old townhouse in Pomfret Center. And that is, you know, a collaboration of Food and Water Watch, 350 Connecticut, and the Sierra Club.
Right. So it's kind of a little traveling show of people that have been going around and educating people. And they've been in Stamford, and they will come. We will come. I say they because it's a collaboration. The people who are very knowledgeable on this would come to your community and let you know what's going on. You know, so one part of this Algonquin incremental market pipeline expansion has been approved, but we are working on trying to stop them. And it may be legal, it may be illegal. They're not supposed to segment these pipelines, and that looks like what they are precisely very much what they're doing. So there's been quite a bit of activity in Massachusetts. I just want to say, so it's not just Connecticut.
But I think Rhode Island, even though it's only supposed to go through a very teeny sliver, I've heard that Rhode Island.
Yeah, I think there's somebody doing a tree sit there right now. I don't know if it's still happening, but somebody trying to, you know, take direct action to raise awareness and to, I think, ultimately try to stop any sort of clear cutting for pipelines. I don't know if that's imminently happening as far as the clear cutting, but they want to get these going within the next 2 or 3 years.
Now, let's talk about what the potential negative impacts are of if this pipeline goes through.
Well, I'll go back to the fact that we want to try to keep as much fossil fuel in the ground as possible. So, you know, we don't want to invest in infrastructure that is promoting more use of fossil fuels. Also, it will be carrying fracked gas. The fracked gas probably carries some radioactive material in it. It carries, again, poisons. Once we extract fossil fuels, they are not benign materials, so they carry a number of toxic substances in them. Pipelines leak. They do leak. Right. How much they leak and how well they are maintained and monitored,
and we're talking miles, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles.
If Martha Klein were here, who is our volunteer lead for the Sierra Club on this in Connecticut, she could probably tell you, but I think it's over 900 miles when you look at the 5 different configurations of pipelines going through the state in whatever ways they have to go. The most recent hearing I went to is in Glastonbury. It proposed to go through underneath the Connecticut River through some habitat for the eastern rattlesnake, which is an endangered species. So, you know, we're trying to think about sustaining life on this planet. Is this really the smartest way to go about things? I think this argument that it is comes from probably not that long ago, probably 9-10 years ago, and I think it's no longer, if it made sense then, I don't think it makes sense now.
Yeah, we're not even sure it made sense then, but now less than
now
ever.
It's less, it's showing up. And again, to remember, this economic argument is that this will be good for us. It is mostly going for export. It is not mostly going for us. It is mostly now, it's clear, just today, Department of Energy said that there can be liquefied natural gas terminal. It can be exported. I shouldn't say that the terminals haven't been approved, but there can be exporting of this. So we're going to have a battle on that line, but people are taking that up across the country, whether it's coal export or whether it's natural gas export. People are trying to stop this in the Northwest, and they've had some very good success out in Washington State. So again, I think if you don't know how to get involved and it's something that you care about and you can muster a little courage and some spirit, not just go, I'm just going to watch movies and do nothing. Sunday would be a great opportunity to come out to the Hartford Earth Festival and be able to talk to different organizations. Start on the website, but you've heard now of, besides the Connecticut Sierra Club, the 350.org and Food and Water Watch, are all working pretty hard on climate and fossil fuels, and I think trying to keep them in the ground and not using them, not expanding their use.
Right. And, at some point, even if we extract it at a great effort and a very rapid rate, it is finite too. So eventually,
correct,
the inevitability is we'll have to learn to live without. So why not plan for it?
That seems much smarter. But again, there is the people who have invested in this have a lot of money invested in it, and people talk about stranded costs that may, be occurring rather quickly. So I want to make sure I say something too. So the Sierra Club is really trying to be like not just the no, the voice of no, which you do have to say no sometimes, but it's also trying to think about solutions. And so I mentioned Mark Jacobson in that study. I wanted to say that this year in the Connecticut legislature, the thing that we were working on was a bill for something called community shared renewable energy. And what that means is for people who have shaded rooftops or who may have a business that rents and can't be the person who says, I want to put solar panels on the top of the roof, or if you live in a historic property where it wouldn't look appropriate, that you could buy shares into a renewable energy project, most likely solar in Connecticut, although it could be other forms of renewable energy. And we were hoping to get a full out program going in Connecticut. 10 other states have it, including Massachusetts, and what that means is up in Massachusetts is more investment, more jobs in clean energy sector. What we got, or what I think we're going to end up with, I mean, the legislative session isn't over yet, but it looks like we're going to have two projects, one for Eversource and one for currently what is known as United Illuminating, and they'll each have one for the next 2 years. So and I just want to say that the Connecticut Academy of Science and Engineering was requested to do a study by the state legislature 2 years ago on this, and they came forward and said it doesn't really look like we need a pilot. But again, there's a lot of pushback by the corporations who are trying to, or maybe they're not trying to, but they need to figure out a different business model than the one that they have. Because I think you and I were talking about this a little bit before we came on. This kind of changes. This is not about centralizing everything now. If we're doing a lot of the shared, not all, but a lot of the renewable energy can be very distributed on people's rooftops, parking lots. My goodness, there's a lot of space there that could be used for solar, shading over vehicles as well as...
And we see pictures, photos from Germany where the parking lots all have panels on them, and I think, wow, in the winter, parking under panels so your car doesn't get snow on it.
Correct. We are not exactly on the cutting edge in Connecticut on renewable energy. We've done okay as far as efficiency, but we are not on the cutting edge with renewable energy. And so, again, the more people we have, though, I'm constantly trying to think about building power, and I want to switch a little bit. I just read an article today somebody sent to me that was in The Guardian. Raul Grijalva, representative from Arizona, talking about, the big environmental groups look very white and probably somewhat older. Maybe 350 has got a lot younger, maybe a look to it.
Right.
You know, they figured out how to work on divestment issues a lot in universities and colleges. But in order for the decision makers to really stand up and notice, they're going to have to see some different people engaged in this. So I'm saying that there's a tricky little spot here where those of us who are sort of comfortable and used to hanging out with who we're used to hanging out with have to push ourselves out and figure out how to really create welcoming and inclusive spaces and invite people to come and talk with us and figure out how do we support one another. There may be things that don't have to do immediately with the environment, but if we're going to enlist other people to work on the issue of climate, which is really going to just affect everything, and it already is, we need to figure out more about how to come together, which I think going back to that People's Climate March in New York, I think that was a model of potential what could happen.
Well, you mentioned that on a global scale, people could be very affected who really didn't contribute much.
Very much, right.
And I think we're seeing within our own country and our own communities, a lot of the lower income people really aren't the ones who contributed to it.
Right.
But you know what? The waste disposal is more likely to be in their neighborhoods. The health impacts are really going to be worse than what you and I experience.
That's right. So, you know, people would name that as environmental racism. If it's in a community where it's mostly white people, it's a justice issue, though, that you are then part of the sacrifice zone, but you're not getting most of the benefits, and you didn't. You know, you're not the investor making the money, and yet your health and can you even drink the water coming out of your tap and so forth. You know, yes, you're getting very little, if any, of the benefits and all of the difficulties from burning fossil fuels, or it could be mining of something like uranium.
Yeah, and I had seen this on the website on the March last September, and it really did spell out how climate is something that really we all have a stake in.
Right.
And so many issues do turn out to be not exactly us versus them. I'll show this. Not exactly us versus them, but a little bit of, almost sum zero, that what's good for one group might cause a different group to have to sacrifice a little more.
Well, right.
But climate.
Right, and that's kind of, I think there's a possibility with clean energy that people would not necessarily have to sacrifice. Now, I mean, we're going to have to look at, I think, income inequality at some point. Now, I'm going to start talking, and I'm going to give some of my own opinions. I will say the Sierra Club is a very deliberative organization, and so I don't want people to go, oh, the Sierra Club said this, although the Sierra Club certainly has worked a lot on democracy initiatives, and we are trying to figure out, I think, how to join hands and actually support the communities that were involved in this People's Climate March. So, but I think we're going to have to look at that a bit, because we may have to figure out how do you pay for this or that if it's a little bit more expensive, but it's not taking into account the costs that are always pushed off when you burn fossil fuels. There are so many external costs that are not factored in to burning those.
Well, that's true in a general way in our U.S. economy. I don't think you can call what we have capitalism, really, because it's corporatism, because the costs get socialized.
Correct.
In a true capitalist society, yes, you have the potential to make a lot of money, but you also carry that risk. But it seems as though today's corporations are protected from the risk.
Correct. So can I say one
Sure.
other thing? So back to the pipelines. Likely tomorrow there will be a vote in the Connecticut legislature on Senate Bill 1078. And this bill would shift the costs of the pipeline expansion from the shareholders to the ratepayers. Now, I have to say, if people call up and ask for the details, I'm going to wish that Martha was here. But we are saying we don't want this. The Conservation Law Foundation is not in support of this bill. I think Acadia Center, which does a lot of policy work on energy throughout the Northeast and up into Canada. This is not going to, again, to be to the benefit of most people. This will be to the benefit of the corporations who own and are putting in the pipelines. So, yeah.
Yeah, so
if you can, call your legislator at 8:30 and, say no.
And I would hope that since this pilot program, which could and should perhaps have been more distributed, but wasn't, since it is in the hands of the two big electricity generators in
distribution
our state,
companies, right? They're distribution companies.
They don't generate.
Right.
That it would be a motivator to them to really do things differently, but that might be over-optimistic.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to say, I'm not, what do I say, my job, I work full-time, and then I do this part-time, and a lot of my job is sort of like being the manager, and I'm trying to get the right people in the team, going. So I'm not like, not at the Capitol, I'm not involved with conversations, but from what I've heard, it is that United Illuminating and Eversource really didn't want to see an expanded all-in sort of project. So we have to figure out something that is going to be different, and I think they have to be willing to figure out something different. I think New York State is in the process of making some changes to their model around electricity distribution, and that's probably what needs to happen here. And that's about all I can say about that.
Yeah. Now, so you started talking a little about the progress that's been made in renewables, solar and wind and geothermal. What kind of positive potential do these industries have?
I think there's a lot of positive potential. I think, well, all I can say is, so I have to look out beyond Connecticut, I think, maybe for some inspiration. But like I said, this Mark Jacobson has done studies, and he's done it with some of the larger states where they've actually mapped out what percentage could be of solar, what percentage could come from wind, maybe from tidal, depending on what the resources are in that area. It looks like we could get 100% of our electricity generation coming from that. I think at one time, Germany, who has supposedly less solar potential than we do, maybe it was a couple of years ago in May, had a day where they generated 75% of their electricity from renewable energy. That's pretty high. This is an industrial country that,
that's at a high latitude.
Right. You look at it and you go, okay, if they can do this technologically, again, we're talking about, I think, cultural, political, social shifts. I don't think it's as much the technology as it is those three other things right now. That is the challenge. I understand that Costa Rica at one point generated 100% one day on renewable energy. So you can see that the potential is there, and it's just, if there was somebody who was watching who was a business person who worked in solar, they might call and give more details that I could give. My thought about this all the time is, how do we keep building both allies organizationally, and how do we bring in more people who haven't been engaged and want to do something about this. And I spoke to a different political party, the Shoreline League of Democratic Women, about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, a dinner that they had, and talking about divesting. So there's lots of different ways people can take action on this. And I learned very recently that the city of New London, I think, is the only city or town in the state of Connecticut that has divested its pension funds from investing in fossil fuels, which is great. We want that sector of our economy to shrink while the clean renewable energy grows. This is a challenging thing to say. There's a lot of people that work right now in fossil fuels. So how do we transition this? I mean, we've been challenged with that down in Bridgeport. We have one remaining coal fired power plant in Connecticut. And so we've got this problem where you've got a city that relies on it as a tax base, and we've got a number of people who work at the plant. You know, the first hearing I went to, a lot of them look like they're my age or older, and to me, I'm going, oh, they're probably looking at the clock. I'm not sure if they're interested in retraining, but you know, you have to think about all of this when you figure out a plan. But we are committed that this needs to retire sooner than later. Again, and the coal is coming from Indonesia. I mean, because, so
it isn't coming from Pennsylvania.
This does. So when you look at it, you go, come on, we can use our compassion. We can use our brains to think about how to transition off of this sooner than later.
And
I mean, it doesn't make sense.
That some of the skills would be
Sure.
transferable.
I would think so, and I would think that these people could learn, and you know. And that's another reason we need to go full out with things like community shared renewable energy. So we need opportunities for people to transition away from working in polluting
and these could
industries.
Be much better jobs that have fewer health implications.
Right.
So in the long run, it could be a real boon.
Right.
But you brought up a good point with the divestment, that sometimes when corporations are acting as they're supposed to for a profit motive, the best way to use your leverage is to make your economic choices, make it not profitable for them to do things that are bad.
Right, and I think 350.org has done a brilliant job with that, a lot of work on campuses. I mean, they're quite willing to work with whoever. One thing I think, one thing we're trying to work on, I think it might be the country of Norway, trying to get them to divest investing in fossil fuels over here. Isn't that kind of interesting?
Oh, that is interesting.
So, so that's just one tactic. People are trying to think, and if you can, you know, yourself, if you can put solar panels, if that's something you can do, that is a help, you know, and there are more and more. So Connecticut has done some good things. I think in the past 4 years, I see many more solar panels going up. In even my town of Norwich, which I live in, I see now some solar panels going up. Our public utility, apparently, it is now economical enough that they are worked out a program so that people can start to put them on. And people should look into it if they can. Yeah.
Well, looking at the Sierra Club website, moving beyond fossil fuels is clearly one of the goals. But there are a couple other things that are mentioned, preserving wild America and also enjoying the outdoors. And we only really have about 6 or 7 minutes left. So I wanted to talk a little bit about preserving open space and what the Sierra Club's issues are statewide on that.
Statewide. So we have right now one particular campaign that we've been working on in Bridgeport also, and it's called Remington Woods. So this woods is about 415 acres. It's probably the largest wooded area in the Northeast that is in an urban setting. And it's partly in Stratford, mostly in Bridgeport. We just got word a couple of weeks ago that some hotel chain wants to build in there, and it looks like, again, probably looking at the tax system that the city of Bridgeport is saying, yes, of course we want the tax revenue. So this is part of the challenge that we have in Connecticut, and how do you get the revenue to cities that were once an industrial base, as Bridgeport was, and now that part of exploitation is over, we got to try to figure out how to raise money. But so we're working right now to prevent a road from being built. That is a lot of money. We're saying this should go into where the infrastructure already is. And of course the issue is, how do you clean up brownfields? I feel like this is partly another corporate giveaway, because it's a corporation that wants to build a hotel. And the way I see it is, they want the landscaping done for them already. They will figure out what little and they can keep the rest. And
whatever infrastructure they need,
we would like this to be and we would like this to be a public space. So that is our sort of key local issue that we've been working on. On the state level, one of the issues is around our budget, which is there's something called the Community Investment Act that has been providing money for grants for open space and watershed acquisition grants. It provides money for affordable housing. It provides money for historic preservation. So you can see it was brilliantly put together, again, collaborating with many people benefit quality of life from this. And right now this is threatened with the budget of not having any money go into that fund for the next 2 years, I believe, if I'm saying this correctly. So along with, of course, the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, which is sort of the umbrella organization for all the land trusts, and I'm sure anybody who cares about affordable housing and who cares about historic preservation, we're all saying this is way too harsh a thing to do. You know, this has been supposed to be set aside, and that makes it much more challenging for land trusts to purchase and make acquisitions of open space, and they're doing a great job with what they have. But if we take this away, it's going to be much more challenging. But we do still want people to get out into what we have. And so I wanted to say, and I think you brought this up correctly, June 6th and 7th is a trails weekend. And Connecticut Forest and Parks Association is the overriding organization.
I think it's ctwoodlands.org. And I did hear that Connecticut has the highest participation rate of any state in the country.
It's great. It's great. And this is all over. So if you go back to that website, you want to say it one more time?
ctwoodlands.org. ctwoodlands.org.
You will find, because I've looked at it, I'm all excited about it, that there's going to be walks all over the place. I plan to do a couple of local ones. I think there might be one at the Arboretum at Connecticut College. You're doing one, you said?
Susan Munger and I are doing one at Bates Woods. And there are about 4 in Groton. There are some... there are some that aren't walks. There are kayak trips. There are,
it's like get outside. It's wonderful, because we really have to live as we get to be adults in a way that most of us are kind of disconnected from the natural world. And this is a great opportunity to get out and reconnect and just enjoy yourself.
And really, if you forget the website, if you just look up Connecticut Trails Weekend, the listing, I think the online listing is probably even a bit more complete,
probably more extensive,
in this booklet, because I think the deadline for submitting in the booklet was something like February.
Yes, so, it was about 3 months ago or something, right?
But yeah, all over the place, Old Lyme, Hamden, Old Saybrook. And there are all kinds of walks and other events.
So you could do something local, or if you've got friends and you want to visit a part of the state that you haven't been to, you know, like you want to go to Northwest Connecticut, there's opportunities there. So it should be really quite a nice event, great opportunity. And we have a new hike leader, I want to say, with the Connecticut chapter. So, you know, we've kind of lost, I think, some ground there, but we're going to try to make a little comeback there and So you can check our website once to see what
Oh,
hiking
good.
or kayak trips are going on. Most of them seem to be in the Hartford, down the Connecticut River area, but take a look and see, you know, so.
Yeah, so getting outside is really,
Great. It's just
really
great.
important. So, as we have like 1 minute, I just wanted to end with the concept that this is an issue that does like have the potential to really unite people. You know, climate disruption, it's not necessarily an issue just for Republicans, Democrats,
Correct.
Greens,
It's
anyone.
for life on this planet,
It's all of
humans and
us.
beyond, yes.
And so it's really important for us to be able to put aside some of our other differences and work on this together.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Well, thank you, Roberta.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you for having me on.
well, thanks for coming on. And just a reminder that this Saturday in Hartford.
Sunday.
It was Sunday, I'm
Yep.
sorry, in Hartford is the Climate March.
Yep, 12 o'clock's the march, followed by the Hartford Earth Festival. Both would be probably worthwhile attending, yeah.
And you'll get to meet some great people. There are some good activities.
Sure.
Get to know what other organizations are doing.
That's right.
So thank you again, and good night to all of you out there. We'll be back next week.